Wyoming Territory, 1883. The wind came down from the Bighorn Mountains sharp and cold. But it was not the mountain air that made Willa Nolan's hands tremble as she clutched the hem of her son's coat. She stood outside the broken-down stagecoach, skirts dusted in dirt, heart beating too fast. Her boy, Samuel, 8 years old and too quiet for his age, clung to her side. His little sister, Susanna, only 6, sat on a wooden crate nearby, her cheeks streaked with tears and soot. The driver had fled after the wheels cracked on a rocky slope 30 miles back. The other passengers had flagged down a passing freight wagon. But Willa had nowhere to go. No money, no kin, just 2 children, a bag of clothes, and a heart full of scars no one could see. She heard the steady hoofbeats before she saw him. A lone rider came out of the trees, tall in the saddle, wide-brimmed hat shadowing his face. His horse was a gray with strong haunches and a quiet gait. The man wore a long duster, and his rifle was slung across the saddle, but his hands stayed loose at his sides. He guided the horse to a stop near the coach wreck and dismounted slowly, boots crunching on dry earth. "You folks all right?" he asked, voice calm, low, and rough like gravel smoothed by water. Willa stepped in front of her children before she realized she had. "We're fine." His eyes flicked to the children. "That's so?" Samuel peeked out from behind her skirt. "Mama, I'm hungry." The man's face softened. He reached into his saddlebag, pulled out a wrapped biscuit, and crouched to offer it. "Here, son." Samuel looked up at Willa. She gave a small nod. The boy took it, hands trembling. "Name's Silas Fletcher," the cowboy said. "I've got a place about 10 miles west. Safe, warm. You can ride with me if you want." Willa's mouth went dry. "We don't take charity." "I ain't offering charity," Silas said. "Just help." She hesitated. The wind cut sharper now, and Susanna was coughing. Silas looked at her and said, "There's no shame in needing a hand, especially when you've got little ones." Willa's jaw clenched. She hated the helplessness, hated needing anyone. "We'll ride with you," she said finally. She helped boost the children onto the horse first, then climbed up behind them. Silas walked beside them, leading the horse on foot through the thickening dusk. They reached his homestead near dark, a squat log cabin with a stone chimney puffing smoke into the twilight. A barn stood nearby, and a small corral held 2 more horses. He built a fire in the hearth while Willa sat stiff on the edge of a chair, children curled up on a woven rug. The warmth seeped into her bones, and something in her chest loosened despite her best efforts. Silas brought bowls of stew and biscuits, and Willa watched the children eat like they had not in days. When the children were settled in a bed piled with quilts, Willa stood near the fire, arms crossed, staring at the flames. "You got people?" Silas asked from his chair. "No, husband." She shook her head. "Left me. Took what little we had. Thought he'd be back. Never was." Silas did not press, just nodded slowly. She turned toward him, arms tight around her ribs. "I'm not staying long. Just until I figure out what comes next." "All right. I mean it," she said, sharper now. "I'm not looking for anything from you." "You already got it," he said. She blinked. "What?" "My help. You already have it. No strings." She stared at him, unsure what to make of that. A beat passed in silence. Then she said, voice low and tight, "I'm afraid to love you." The words shocked her as they came out. She had not meant to say them, had not even known she felt them, not until that moment. Silas looked up at her, eyes steady, unreadable. "I'll wait," he said simply, "until you're not." She turned away, heart thudding, throat tight. He did not move, did not press. Just let the silence settle again. The next morning, Willa found bread and eggs on the table. her children laughing outside while Silas showed Samuel how to hold a hammer right. He watched the boy with patience Willa had not seen in a man before. Over the days that followed, Willa tried to keep her distance. She mended clothes, cleaned dishes, helped cook, tried not to watch Silas too closely. But she saw how he never raised his voice, how he carried Susanna when she fell asleep in the hay, how he taught Samuel how to saddle a horse. He never touched her, never cornered her with words. But he was steady, always there, like the mountain wind and the river's edge. One night, after the children were asleep, she sat on the porch while he smoked a pipe beside her. The stars stretched endless above them. "I don't know how to be with someone," she said quietly. "Not anymore." Silas leaned back in his chair, pipe resting on his knee. "You do not have to know. You just have to want to try." She looked at him, eyes tired. "I want to, but I'm scared." "I know." She let out a breath, then another. "They were abandoned," she whispered. "By him. By me if I let myself believe it. I do not know how to stop being angry at that." "You keep showing up," he said. "That is how." She turned her face toward him, eyes wet. He did not move, did not reach for her. But his voice was soft when he said, "I will wait as long as you need. Just do not shut the door on me." She nodded once, then again, and in the long stillness of the porch, something in her began to shift. Not all at once, but it was a start. The first frost came early that year. It laid itself thin and silver over the high grass outside the cabin, curling the edges of leaves and stiffening the earth beneath boot soles. Willa stood at the edge of the pasture fence before sunrise, arms wrapped around her middle. Behind her, the cabin's chimney sent up a lazy thread of smoke into the pale sky. She hadn't meant to rise before the children, but her thoughts had carried her up out of sleep and wouldn't let her rest. She watched the mare pacing the north side of the corral, one of Silas's, a dappled roan with uneven ears. The horse blew mist into the air and tilted its head toward her. "You don't trust Easy either," she murmured. Footsteps came from behind, slow and deliberate. She didn't turn, but she knew whose they were. "She lost her foal last spring," Silas said beside her, voice quieter than the wind. "Took to pacing like that not long after. I tried to break her of it, but she's got her mind set." Willa studied the horse another moment. "Some hurts you don't mend. You just learn to carry them." Silas didn't answer right away. He rested his arms on the fence rail beside her, looking out. "I was 16 when I left home," he said finally, "south of Fort Worth. My older brother took a bullet in a card game, and Pa drank himself dead not long after. I figured there wasn't anything left worth staying for." Willa turned her head, surprised. He hadn't spoken about his past before. "I drifted," he went on. "Drove cattle, broke horses, laid track for a spell. Thought being alone made it easier. But it just made the quiet louder." She looked down at her hands, fingers red from the cold. "Why'd you stop drifting?" "Got tired of waiting for something to change me. Figured I'd build something instead." Willa watched the frost melt where the sun touched the fence. "Do you regret it?" "No," he said, "but I reckon I was building it for someone I hadn't met yet." She swallowed. That feeling rose again, the one she hadn't let herself name. She pressed a palm flat to the rail. "I don't know what I'm supposed to offer someone like you," she said, voice low. Silas turned toward her. "You think I'm looking for something polished?" She met his eyes then. They were steady, weathered as the land around them. "I've got a boy who flinches when he hears boots on a porch," she said, each word pulled from a place she hadn't touched in years. "A girl who carries her sadness in her sleep. And I've got nothing but calloused hands and a head full of doubts." Silas gave a slow nod. "Then we match." She pulled in a breath, sharp and cold. He looked out toward the trees. You see that pine at the edge of the rise? She followed his gaze. Yes. I planted it the spring I came here. Folks said it wouldn't take root this high up. Too thin, too dry. But it grew. Willa studied the tree. It was crooked, bent from wind, but taller than anything around it. Maybe nothing's easy up here, he said. But things can grow, if you give them time. From inside the cabin came a soft knock. Samuel's face at the window. Hair mussed, eyes wide with sleep. I should go in, she said, stepping back. Silas opened the gate for her. I'll be in after I check the traps. She nodded once, brushed past him, and walked toward the cabin. The door creaked as she stepped inside, and Samuel ran up to her, wrapping his arms around her waist. You left, he mumbled into her skirt. I came back, she whispered, smoothing his hair. Later that afternoon, as the sun dipped low, Willa gathered eggs from the coop, the hem of her dress dusted with straw. She turned to find Silas leaning against the barn wall, arms folded, watching the children chase each other through the brittle grass. You thinking about going? He asked without preamble. I was, she replied, not meeting his gaze. But the wagon axles still cracked. I can fix that. She looked at him then. I know. He nodded once, slow and sure. But I won't. Not unless you ask me to. Willa walked past him, pausing only when they stood shoulder to shoulder. She didn't speak, didn't move for a long moment. Then she said, If I give this a name, it'll be real. Silas's voice was steady. That's the point, isn't it? She turned her face toward his, inches apart. I'm still scared. I'm still waiting. And this time she didn't step away. The days shortened. Frost clung to the porch rail each morning, and the creek behind the barn began icing over at the edges. Willa took to rising before the sun, kneading dough in the quiet while the children slept behind the curtain that separated the cabin's back room. Silas had offered to build on more space come spring, but she hadn't answered him yet. This morning, her hands moved with ease over the floured board. The dough was warm from the fire and the silence was deep. She could hear the steady rhythm of Silas splitting wood outside, each strike clear and certain. It should have made her feel safe. Sometimes it did. She turned when the door creaked open and he stepped inside, coat wet from snowmelt. He pulled off his gloves and laid them by the hearth. You'll freeze your fingers, she said, not looking up. If I do, you'll have to take over the fence work, he replied. She allowed herself a small breath through the nose. You'd get better lines if I did. Silas leaned against the table. You ever build a fence? No, but I watched my uncle do it back in Missouri. He didn't use near as many nails as you. Well, he said, brushing with dust from his sleeve. I trust nails more than I trust luck. Willa folded the dough over once more, then pressed it flat. Luck's never stayed with me long either. He didn't move, didn't speak. The fire popped behind them. Susanna's asking questions, she said after a moment. About where we'll be when the snow comes in deep. About whether we'll still be here. Silas didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was quiet. And what did you tell her? That I don't know yet. He nodded. That's fair. Willa turned to face him, arms dusted in flour. She wants something I can't promise. Stability. Home. The kind that doesn't vanish when a man gets bored or mean. Silas met her eyes. You think I'm like that? No, she said. But I think I don't know what you are. He stepped closer, not touching her. Ask me. She crossed her arms. What makes a man stay when he's got no reason to? I've got 3 reasons, he said. A woman who works her hands raw and still finds time to braid her daughter's hair. A boy who listens more than he speaks. And a girl who's learning to laugh again. Willa didn't speak. Silas added, I'm not staying for comfort. I've had comfort. It doesn't teach you anything. A log in the hearth fell with a soft thud. Willa's face shifted, but not into a smile. Something closer to a quiet understanding. I don't trust what comes easy, she said. I wouldn't ask you to, he replied. She moved past him toward the stove, lifting the kettle to pour water into a basin. Susanna's birthday's next month. She says she wants a red ribbon. Silas leaned a hip against the table. I know a man rides to Casper once a month for flour and salt. I could ask him to bring one. Willa paused, then gave a single, short nod. That was all. Later that morning, while the children were outside gathering kindling, Willa found Silas in the barn, brushing down the roan. He didn't look up, just kept the stroke slow and steady. She stepped inside, arms folded. It's not that I don't feel something, she said. It's that I feel too much, and I don't know what to do with it. You don't have to do anything with it yet, he said, not turning. You just have to let it be. She watched the way his hand moved over the horse's flank. Careful, measured. I spent years pretending I didn't need anyone, she said. I thought if I didn't ask for help, I couldn't be disappointed. Now he looked at her. And now, I don't want to pretend anymore, she said. But I don't want to need you just to survive. Silas set the brush down. Then don't. Need me because you want to stay. She didn't answer, but she didn't leave. That night, after the children were asleep, Willa sat at the foot of the bed, sewing patchwork into a worn dress of Susanna's. Silas was near the hearth, oiling the stock of his rifle. The room was warm and quiet. She spoke without looking up. If I stayed, it wouldn't be because I had nowhere else to go. He didn't lift his head. I know. It would be because I'm choosing this. Silas set the rifle aside. That would be enough. She tied off her thread, then turned to face him fully. I'm not afraid anymore, she said. He stood slowly, crossed the room, and knelt in front of her. Then I'm here, he said. For all of it. She placed her hand over his. For the first time, her fingers didn't shake. A week before the heavy snow was expected, Willa stood in the smokehouse with her sleeves rolled and her apron damp, tying cord around a strip of venison. The air smelled of hickory and salt. She moved carefully, checking the meat, turning it just so, the way Silas had shown her. Behind her, the door creaked. She didn't turn. You split those hickory logs like I asked? She said. Silas stepped inside, the cold clinging to his coat. I did, and stacked them by the east wall. You were right, it's drier there. She tied off the cord and hung the meat on the far hook. I usually am. He leaned against the doorframe. I know. She wiped her hands on her apron, then finally looked over at him. His face was ruddy from the wind, a new scratch thin across his cheek. She didn't ask how it got there. He wouldn't have mentioned it if it mattered. I was thinking, she said, we'll need more than just venison and beans to get through January. I can trade mending for flour in town. I already spoke to Mrs. Dobbins, he said. She's got 3 bags put aside for us, if you can fix her winter skirts. Willa raised a brow. You arranging trades for me now? I asked. She was glad of it. She untied her apron, folding it with care. Next time, let me do the asking. He nodded. All right. She stepped past him into the pale afternoon light. The ground glistened where sleet had fallen and frozen. From the barn came the sound of Samuel's voice, reading from one of the primers Silas had brought back from town. Susanna's laugh followed, high and light. Willa paused. They're different now. Silas followed her gaze. So are you. She looked up at him. I don't feel different. You don't wake up scared anymore. I still get quiet, she said. You're allowed. They walked together toward the cabin, boots sinking into the brittle grass. She stopped before the porch, looking at the place where the window frame had been patched with new wood. You've been fixing things when I'm not looking. I don't do it for notice. I know, but I notice. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of pine from the hills. Willa pulled her shawl tighter. There's a man who came through the creek trail this morning, Silas said after a beat. Said he was headed west. Asked after you. She turned slowly. What did he look like? Tall. Dark coat. Southern drawl. Scar across his chin. Willa's jaw went tight. What did you tell him? That you weren't here. She nodded, eyes on the horizon. He's not someone I ever wanted to see again. I figured. Did he say if he'd be back? No. But he looked like the kind that doesn't need to. She touched the porch rail, fingers drumming once. He's the reason I stopped believing in promises. Silas didn't speak. I was 17 when he found me. Said he'd build us a house. Said he'd never raise a hand. She looked at her hands. He kept one of those. Silas stepped beside her, close but not touching. If he comes back, I'll be here. I don't want you in the middle of it. I'm not in the middle. I'm beside you. The door opened behind them, and Samuel poked his head out. Mama. Susanna wants to show you the fort we made. Willa didn't look at Silas as she passed him, only brushed her fingers along his hand as she went. That night, she sat by the window with a needle in hand, mending the hem of one of Silas's work shirts. The fire cracked low in the hearth, and the children were already asleep. Silas crouched by the stove, setting in another log. You don't have to fix that. I know, but I want to. He watched her a moment. The lamplight caught the edge of her jaw, the curve of her wrist as she worked. He crossed the room, slow, then sat across from her. I could put up a fence along the south pasture in spring, he said. Keep the elk out of the garden. She met his eyes. You're planning for spring. I am. She set the shirt in her lap. So am I. He didn't speak, just waited. I want us to be one thing, she said. Not something halfway. We can be, he said. If you're sure. I'm not scared anymore, she said. But I still don't know how to say what I feel. You don't have to say it. He reached for her hand. She let him take it. I'll build the fence, he said. I'll plant the garden. And in the hush between them, no more promises were needed. By the time the first deep snow came, Willa had carved a rhythm into the days that felt like it had always belonged. The cabin held warmth in its walls now, not just from the fire but from the shape their lives had taken inside it. Silas had built a second cot for Samuel beside the stove, and Susanna slept nestled in a bed of quilts by the wall, her cheeks pink with sleep each night. Willa stood by the window one late afternoon, watching the snow fall thick and slow over the fields. The sky had turned to slate, and the pines bowed under the weight of it. Inside, the smell of rabbit stew wound through the room, and Silas was sharpening a blade by the fire, quiet and focused. I've been thinking, she said without turning. Once the snow lifts, I want to start keeping hens. He didn't look up. We'd need to build a shelter for them. Ground's too cold to dig posts now. I know, but I want the children to help, so they can learn to tend something. Silas set the blade down and stood, brushing his hands on his trousers. You want them to feel rooted. I want them to know they belong somewhere, she said. He crossed the room and stood beside her, both of them watching the snow. They already do. She turned toward him. Do you think they know it? He nodded. Children know what's true, even before they know how to say it. She reached for his hand and held it between both of hers. I used to think I'd always be moving, always looking for the next safe place. You found it. I did, she said, voice thick. And I'm not leaving. Silas kissed her forehead, slow and sure. Neither am I. That night, they ate around the table while the wind howled against the roof. Samuel told a story about a fox track he'd spotted near the shed, and Susanna asked if they could build a sled before winter's end. Willa listened with her hands folded, watching Silas watch the children with a quiet pride that filled the air more than the fire did. Later, after the children were asleep, Willa pulled a small wrapped bundle from the wooden chest by the bed. "I meant to give you this sooner," she said. Silas raised a brow, sitting across from her. "You didn't have to give me anything." She handed it to him. "I wanted to." Inside the cloth was a scarf, hand-stitched from wool she traded for in October. The pattern was simple, but the stitches were tight and careful. He ran his fingers over the weave. "You made this. I started it the day I chose to stay." Silas folded the scarf carefully, then looked up. "You're not afraid anymore." "I'm not the same woman who rode in on that broken wagon," she said. "No," he said. "You're stronger." "I'm not strong because I survived," she said. "I'm strong because I let myself be loved." He stood, crossed the space between them, and cupped her face in his hands. "I do love you," he said, voice steady. "I want this life with you, for the rest of what we have." She leaned into him, her forehead against his. "Then let's build it, day by day." They married quietly in early spring. No preacher, no crowd, just the four of them standing near the creek that ran behind the barn, with the trees budding fresh and the wind softer now. Silas carved a ring from pine and placed it on her finger. Samuel held Susanna's hand, and both children laughed when Willa kissed Silas beneath the birch. In the months that followed, they built a coop with Samuel's help, and Susanna planted wildflowers along the fence. Willa taught her how to care for the roots, while Silas built an addition to the cabin, letting the children pound nails with dull heads while he guided their hands. The roof leaked once in the summer rain, and Willa patched it with her own hands while Silas steadied the ladder. The man who had once asked after her never returned. Whether he'd moved on or met some other end, she never asked. She felt no fear now when riders passed the trail. She no longer looked back. By the next winter, they had a cow that Susanna named Maple, a new iron stove Silas had traded a saddle for, and a home filled with the sound of voices that knew they belonged to each other. At night, Willa sometimes sat by the fire with her head on Silas's shoulder, his hand resting over hers, both of them listening to the children breathing in the next room. She no longer wondered what would come next. She had chosen this life, and he had chosen her. And in that quiet, enduring way they had both come to understand without grand declarations or promises carved in stone. Love had taken root deeper than any wound, and grown into something whole. They stayed together, always.